Hi, I'm John Atack, and it's my great pleasure to invite my guest Jessica Terwiel to
Hello.
yet another conversation. So here we are.
Here we are, about to talk about
paranoid thoughts, I think you said, or am I being
yes,
paranoid?
maybe,
I didn't imagine that, did I?
maybe,
Good.
perhaps.
Tell us what you're thinking.
Well, I was obviously watching the things that are going on, that have been going on, and I've been taking a look at social media here and there to see how people interact, talking about the Capitol and what happened there.
Yes.
And it made me rethink a lot of thoughts about distrust, and which can be called paranoia under certain circumstances, depends a little bit on a couple of factors. So I was thinking, okay, so here's and this is a fresh thought that occurred to me yesterday, and it sort of I'm not sure it makes total sense, but I've thought it would be interesting to discuss it a little bit and see where it goes or what it leads to, which is this: the more things you believe that are not, but that don't comport with reality, the more likely you are going to be to develop paranoid thoughts.
That does seem sensible, yeah.
Because you're going to clash with reality. People are going to stare at you, or things are going to work out entirely different from what you expected. You're going to feel betrayed by people or situations or just something, anything, invisible forces. So it has to lead to paranoid thoughts. It has to lead to the question, how can this be when it should have been what I believed that it would be? So that's what I was thinking. So maybe it also works the other way around. Maybe the more distrustful we are, the more we struggle to, maybe that's an indication that we're struggling to see things the way they really are. Maybe it's in sort of a hint or a diagnostic signal that we may not be on the right track. We may not have understood what the facts are telling us.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
and that extends out. I mean, we have QAnon, if we're talking about what happened at the Capitol, with 3 million Facebook followers from 71 countries who are, we've heard about alternative facts, but the reality, there's also alternative reality and it's, I mean, I think that the thing that's bothered me most in this division is the amount of rage and hatred that it's spurring, and not just on one side either, that people are becoming angry to the point where they can't talk about it.
Well, that's another interesting aspect of paranoid thinking. It is almost impossible to have distrustful thoughts or paranoid thoughts without being either in a bit of a panic, really, because if things are so threatening or so unreliable or so devious or so secretly nasty or whatever, something is really wrong. So the least it should cause is quite a bit of fear or angst or anxiety or panic or rage.
Yes.
Aggression, like how can they, who in their right minds, blah, 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 we got to do something about it. Either one, I mean, the adrenaline is going to go high, and hence the fight or flight reaction is going to go high as well.
And I mean, in our overly communicative society, we tend to teeter on the edge of angst. I mean, W.H. Auden famously said, "This is the age of anxiety." And I think he was talking in the 1930s when he said that. So that, and the media stokes anxiety and controversy and conflict, because that's what makes a story interesting, having antagonism within it, and that's what captures human attention. So it's easy to live on that edge. I have many friends who have fixed opinions. They're, I got into trouble with a friend the other week by pointing out that Barack Obama was a war criminal. And it's like, drone strikes are an offense against the Geneva Conventions. That's it. Anybody that does them. And the response was interesting. The response was, but he wasn't as bad as George W. Bush. And that's true. That's very true. But we tend to polarize. We tend to belong to a camp. I often say I'm not on any side. That's my position. I'm not on any side. I want us all to be able to communicate if we can. It doesn't mean I don't have strong opinions about things, but I try to understand if somebody's opinion differs greatly from my own. And I try then to talk about evidence, which is usually a mistake, because evidence is not something that people particularly like. I think the Milton Erickson's answer, which is telling somebody a story they can't possibly understand and changing their mind with it, would be better. But I'm afraid I don't have that talent. I read Erickson's therapeutic stories and I don't know what he's talking about. So it's not helpful to me. I can't do that. So I'm afraid I have to get back to evidence. And that does come back to trust. Who do we trust in terms of where we take our evidence from? I don't trust David Icke, for example. I never managed to believe in transdimensional lizards or the ayahuasca that he took to apparently come to that revelation. And for me, the thought that somebody would pronounce for years that something is true and then admit that they'd taken a severe hallucinogen and that had brought them to this opinion, I tend to distrust their opinion from then on. But I do have at least one friend who believes that David Icke is a wonderful source of information.
Yes, yes. And I talk to some QAnon believers and people who are deep into the conspiracy world, and they honestly believe that we are being funneled into an existence in some sort of biodome type things that will be connected via tunnels through wildernesses where we won't be allowed to come. And they talk about a reality. It's like they're reading a book to me. I see none of that happen around me, but they believe it is true. And that's, suppose you believe something that the people you're talking to don't believe, that they will just stare at you and it will be so clear that there is no connection. There's no connection here. You're on your own. You could, it must be like 1,000 mice walking on your skin. Like you're not being trusted anymore. You're the weirdo in the room. They think you're silly. It's devastating. It must be devastating to be honestly believing things that people will treat you like this for. It must be very hard. And a lot of this happens to some extent to cult members. Yeah. When they are out recruiting, when they are interacting with the world, people look at them and think, oh, those are weirdos, more often than not, especially if you're wearing orange robes or chanting things or handing out leaflets that nobody wants to read, or, there's all these things. It must be very unsettling, but that will only feed into the paranoid feelings and the paranoid thoughts. So where do you go then? How do you get to a shared reality, which is basically, I think, the only thing that is a bit soothing, even if it's an ugly reality, but at least you can sit there together and agree, which is something we need.
Well, here is a place that I do have some experience, from 1983 through to 1995. Into 1995, I talked with hundreds of people whose view of the world disagreed with my own. The first thing I found that was significantly important was it needed to be a one-on-one conversation. That if you go into a room full of people who have a different belief, you're going to have problems. And you then, rather than being argumentative and hostile to the person, you have to develop rapport. You have to show that, you know, you're a human being too, and you have to you have to come at them with respect, and, you know, the permission for them to believe what they want to believe, so that you don't raise the kind of ego walls and make life difficult. From there, you have to develop authority. You have to show that you know what you're talking about. And, you know, because I was dealing largely, almost exclusively with Scientologists, it meant that because I understood the subject very thoroughly indeed, I could, you know, go to some place, you know, where they would respect my authority. They'd accept that I knew about that. You then move into paralleling, where rather than talking head on about what it is they believe, you talk about something similar. So with Scientologists, I would show them a video called My Dance is Complete, which was a documentary about Rajneesh, which was rather better than Wild Wild Country at explaining what Rajneeshis actually did and believed. Wild Wild Country was beautifully made. I came away with very little information about the group. But in that documentary, you see them setting up the Big Muddy at Antelope in Oregon, taking things over and poisoning, you know, committing the second largest mass poisoning in American history. The first was performed by the US government on the Native Americans with the smallpox blankets, of course, one of the great criminal offenses of history. And by showing them this video, they felt able to sit back and say, no, they're crazy cult members. We're nothing like that. And it was then you know, because you've got enough of a dialogue by then, you've spent enough time with the person, you're having a conversation. I could show them The Shrinking World of L. Ron Hubbard, 20-minute documentary, in which Hubbard makes a complete fool of himself. He quite evidently is awful in front of the cameras, though he wrote the public relations series about how to deal with these things. He sits there blinking at the camera and he contradicts himself. You know, he has no second wife. He admits to having two wives, but had no second wife. He had a first wife and a third wife. So he makes the bald statement, I had no second wife. When asked about his Swiss bank accounts, he said, I do have one. And when asked about reincarnation, my particular favorite, he just stumbles and he doesn't know how to answer. And Charlie Nairn, the interviewer, says, but your followers believe in reincarnation. And Hubbard immediately says, oh, yes. You know, so, and that introduces enough cognitive dissonance, and one has created a friendly enough relationship. You're not trying to attack the person. And I'm not there to change their minds. I'm there to offer them information. And the distrust moves, the paranoia, because Scientology is paranoid. No two ways about it. They believe in the World Bank conspiracy. They believe in all sorts of governmental attacks and controls. It was often put forward that I must be hired by the CIA. Sadly, I never received the paychecks. But you have to, it's that one-on-one situation that I think is important, and having a tremendous amount of patience.
Yes, I think that for transmitting information and getting people to let it past the first hurdles and the cognitive dissonance so that they are willing to consider it, I think that works. In therapies, it's the other way around. You have to be the target of the distrust. It is necessary for people to be 100% without trust, and to find out that the person that they're not trusting is a nice person. You have to be at the core of the cognitive dissonance, the not trusted good person, because that is basically necessary for the entire process of undoing all the beliefs that are attached to the distrust, because they're about anything and everything, about the self, about others, about feelings, about how things work in the world, about it's the whole process that people have to go through to change their entire mindset sometimes after they leave a group with a belief. And that's yeah, that's definitely different. It is. It, and it's difficult to be the distrusted party, I find. It's taken me years to learn to be the distrusted party and to just, yeah, to just take that in my stride as a normal fact of life, to just let it go. The first times you find that somebody is thinking sometimes the most hilarious things, but often the most aggressive or frightening things about you, you get really scared. It's very unsettling. And it's yeah, we all have to learn to deal with distrust and not being trusted and being regarded as an untrustworthy person or an unfriendly person or something, where it happens at a small scale in any fight that we have with a loved one. We innocently say something and they take it all wrong, or the other way around. They make a remark and we think, how could you say this? And they're like, what's the problem? You know, because yeah, it goes into a slot of our perception where it shouldn't have gone because it wasn't intended to go there, but it ended up there anyway. So we think an entire thing about it and we get upset. So that's the small scale version, but it's the same thing. What we think is real, it's not what they were saying, not from their point of view anyway.
Yeah, and I think we've all had that experience.
Yes, we have. And then once you're calm and you're talking about it and you're finally making a cup of tea and going over it, and they say, but I was just saying this. And you go like, oh, sorry, I didn't pick up on that. And it happens. It's a small scale version, but the large scale versions are sometimes quite scary. To know that somebody is thinking the most horrible things about you is not an easy thing to deal with. And I learned a lot from a colleague who connected it very much to epistemology, to how do you try to figure out what's true, you know, what's real, because reality is there. Reality won't go away. If you can befriend reality, you have a reliable friend because it will be there in the morning, every day. Really, it's there. Yeah. And if you understand how reality works, then it's somehow that's soothing, even if reality is not beautiful. So, but she would have this, I learned this from her. She would say, oh, but you don't need for me to explain that that's wrong. Really, reality will show you that you're wrong. She would just, and she could totally relax you entirely. It was not her business to say you're mistaken, because they were going to find out anyway, because they were mistaken. So that was like, she would point to, there's a third party in the room called reality. Go consult with them. You know, they won't go away anytime soon, which is a lovely strategy for herself. And it was a lovely strategy for me. I learned a lot from that, to look for how to perceive reality, how to sort of befriend the facts.
We see a parallel in the sciences and in scientific thinking, which is where evidence seems to mean something. And as our friend Yuval Laor would say, it's a nice story. It seems to make sense. So if you read Freud, if you accept this, therefore that, and you can see that the story hangs together, it's libido, thanatos, all of this sort of thing. My favorite profound example of this is the work of Raymond Dart, who was a professor at Witwatersrand in South Africa, and became world famous in 1925 when he announced the discovery of the tongue baby, which is a hominid fossil. And he put an idea into the world. He looked at the Schwarzkrans cave and found, which is still a rich source, they're still finding things there. And he'd found hominid skulls penetrated by these tusks, and he found the tusks with other hominid remains. And he determined that this proved that hominids, early humans, had murdered other hominids. And this became the foundation of the idea of aggression, which Konrad Lorenz, who I do like to point out was in fact a Nazi for a period of his life, but Konrad Lorenz became the great guru of aggression. And this gave this idea that we are basically vicious animals. That is human nature. Like it or not, that's reality. Make friends with reality. In 1977, a man called Bob Brain, who succeeded to the same chair at Witwatersrand University, took the same tusks and put them under an electron microscope, and he found marks on them which interested him. So he had his students go out and dig up some roots, and he found that you got exactly the same marks if you dug up parsnips with these things. He then went and looked at the skulls that had been damaged by these things, and he found there were always 2 holes. And in fact, the hominids had been killed by the animal that had the tusks. And when that animal had died, later on, hominids had found these tusks and found they were very good to use as pickaxes. That should have changed what had come out. So making friends with the evidence and being willing to reconsider the evidence.
Yes.
And we then, of course, found out, we modeled ourselves on Pan-troglodytes, the chimpanzee, who are quite aggressive. And along came the bonobo, this species that's the third. We're the third chimpanzee, they're the second. Yeah. And they aren't alpha male hierarchical societies.
They're hippies.
So we don't have to be those things. Then along comes evolutionary development, and you realize that what's going on in the human brain was not fixed there on the savannah in modules, that we are evolving in real time, and that because we have language and symbolism, we're actually able to change our behavior in a moment. We're not forced by evolution to behave in a certain way. And so the paranoia that comes with the idea that we are, all human beings are horribly aggressive, it's still there. It's still there in political science, the idea that selfishness is the dominating characteristic of human beings. So much so that Margaret Thatcher, in fact, had the whole civil service do a survey, and she promoted the people who admitted they were selfish, those with the psychopathic tendencies, narcissistic tendencies, and demoted anybody who said that they had an altruistic view. Yeah. So that's had an incredible effect throughout the world, all based upon these tusks found in a cave in South Africa in the 1920s. So you can develop a paranoid idea by misinterpreting reality. And
yes, well, we do it all the time.
It happens, yeah.
We do it all the time. So I've been thinking also about because when I look at how people communicate about these dramas at the Capitol, for example, but there's other, everybody has their examples, and everybody knows somebody, at least one person, about whom they think they got it wrong. They just don't get it. Yeah. That's what we think about other people. We all do that. I don't think there are that many realities. I think there's one. So if we work hard, we can find some common ground. And so I've been thinking, because the angst and the aggression that come with the paranoid thinking, they're a problem. They're obviously a problem, and you see it. I mean, the viciousness with which people try to get into that building. It's the fanaticism that comes from all these feelings, the constant adrenaline. It's so visible. It's so visible. It's visible in all these comments. And it's not only people who try to get in there, it's all the comments of people who are trying to tell them off and telling them they're idiots and they're this and that and murderers and whatnot. Oh, the words that so there's a lot of adrenaline involved with paranoid thinking, either way, wherever it comes from and whoever is doing it. So, but the thing is, or at least this is speculation, because I'm toying with this, working with it a lot, trying to figure it out, trying to read up on paranoid thinking. There's not a lot of good material in my profession about paranoid thinking. It's very limited, unfortunately. It's very much about how to diagnose it, and then we'll see. Yeah. Yeah, which is frustrating. But I've been thinking that probably the core, and this must be also somehow at the root of coming out of cult-like thinking, it is keeping an open mind to discovering that things might be different than you thought.
Yes.
Just keeping that open mind, just be willing to find out something new that you have to insert into your mindset somehow, because it is something you found out. You have to accept that it's there, that's a fact, it's true, or there's no way around it. And the constant willingness to allow for the possibility of that to happen. Mm-hmm. That is probably one of the most calming things that there are, because you cannot be 100% convinced and, going for your point of view, if at the same time you're always leaving open this 1% of, something might come up, something might change. I might discover something, somebody might present something, I might be confronted with something. That should take the worst of the antics and the frantics out of it. Hopefully.
And frantics. This is very much what John Stuart Mill said on Liberty in 1859, and still a basic textbook that I think that I think I first noticed this in a neighbour who's now, it's 20 years ago that I noticed it. He's now nearly 90, bless him. And I noticed how calm he was, no matter what was said. That nothing seemed to rouse, and if he disagreed with you, he would just say it in a matter-of-fact way. And it somehow I really, he's an architect, he's really nice guy. And it started me thinking about gradually that maybe maturity, maybe growing up as a human being, means being willing to hear other people's points of view.
Yes.
And take them in, and being, willing to perhaps even, I admit it, slightly enjoy cognitive dissonance. So rather than feeling, I've got to defend myself because you disagree, feeling, oh, wow, that's interesting. There's something for me to investigate,
Yes, exactly. Yes, to have the self-control to allow for this new thing to wiggle, to find some wiggle room in your mind, and to tell you, hey, I need some space. You gotta do something here. Something needs to shift. Of course. It requires resilience. It requires, some sort of trust that you will figure out what it is that makes it so a thing of cognitive dissonance. Definitely. That's how we grow up, when we learn to want to see that things are not the way we thought that they were just a moment ago.
I remember being in, I think it was Nevada, the day that the first Gulf War broke out. And I went into a shop to buy some cigarettes because up until 23 years ago, I used to smoke. And the guy behind the counter asked what we thought about Iraq. And my journalist friend, who knew more about tact and diplomacy than I did, because I was just floored. I didn't know what to say. I think it's a barbarous and criminal act, that's going on there, but on both sides. And he managed to say something neutral, and this guy said, I think we ought to bomb those effers flat. And it was just such a horrifying moment to see that this man, who probably never met an Iraqi in his life, wanted to destroy the Fertile Crescent where Western civilization arose, because he was angry. And I have no idea what he was angry about, but this way that people live in their rage There's a great documentary called The Brainwashing of My Dad, which I think is
Yes.
on YouTube,
Yes.
where you see an old guy, this gentle, lovely old man, his whole worldview shifted by listening to Rush Limbaugh and Fox News.
Yes.
And it seems, from the other people at the documentarian interviews, it seems to be a pandemic that of opinion change, of people being roused up and enraged by absolutely false information, by complete nonsense, Trump nonsense.
Well, that's another thing. If we're going to talk about feeding people false information on purpose, obviously it helps to make them more paranoid and more aggressive, because false information is dysfunctional. It doesn't work. In real life, it doesn't work. You will meet at each and every turn, you will meet people and facts and books and newspapers, and you will meet stuff that tells you you're wrong. This is not it. It's not a fact. So it will be very, very frustrating to be thinking that way. But if you do not keep that open mind, if you do not work on having that mindset of taking in other things and wanting to compare them and figure out which one should be given more weight, if you want to be certain and you already have this info in your head, then you're going to be aggressive. Then you're going to have a lot of adrenaline. Everything is going to be a brick wall where you hit your nose again and again and again. And people end up frantic, absolutely frantic.
Yes.
It is obvious. If you prefer to be certain and you have been fed the wrong things, life must be horribly, horribly contrarian, just everything. Having breakfast must be a contrarian experience, because you look at the cereals and there's something wrong with them, or they've, Bill Gates, I don't know, something.
Well, let's face it, Kellogg believed that by curing constipation with cereals, he could make people have less sex. That's not a paranoid idea. That's a truth.
Oh, yeah.
Same with Graham and Graham's crackers for the American audience. That's why they were designed.
Yeah. So, but that's how you get these crowds. And I also think, by the way, but I have no evidence at all for this, it's just a speculation of mine, but I do think that adrenaline is also an addictive drug. I think that we can totally feel the need to feel adrenaline. I have been there. I've been, when I have assisted in crises, where you have to, it's like something is, the house is burning down and you just have to keep going and keep going and keep going until the moment of peace arrives and you can relax and finally cry and worry about it. But I have been in a couple of crises that lasted a couple of days, and for days afterwards, I just had some sort of cold turkey where I needed adrenaline. I just needed to watch horror movies or do something to get, to get back to that worked up state that was not leaving me alone.
Firstly, one of the beliefs of QAnon is that the deep state is extracting adrenaline from people to, and they've picked up, it's actually Hunter S. Thompson, I think, who invented adrenochrome in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And he did invent it. It wasn't, he decided they'd taken everything and now they'd have this.
Yes,
so
lovely.
I think also cortisol is highly involved in panic states. And, I too have been in situations of absolute out and out panic where I had to be the one that was dealing with it.
Yeah.
And it takes, I can remember I did an intervention where the Scientologists found us, and we had 7 carloads of Scientologists following us. And for 4 days, we had 2 guys who were in the Marines, had been in the Marines, who were working security for us. One of them had been in 14 INT, which is the counter-terror unit in Northern Ireland. We escaped for 4 days. We got away. They knew where we were, but they didn't know where the person we were talking to was. And so being, on one hand, I've got this guy teaching me counter-terrorist tactics, being followed everywhere and photographed and all of this. It took me about 3 days after I got home of just lying on the floor and shaking to get this out of my system.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. very interesting 3 days, because it actually put me into a mindset I'd never been in before. I'd never been sleep deprived like this before, and it was actually very useful, because it allowed me to question some of my own fundamental beliefs. Most essentially, the idea I'd been taught from birth in a Christian household that I had to love everybody. And that just came up. And for the first time, I went, this is an unquestionable assumption. This is where I discovered this concept back in 1991 of the unquestionable assumption, these things I believe that I may not challenge. And it put me into the place where I said, I can challenge anything.
Yes.
And I did challenge it. And I decided it's an erroneous belief that while I would like to be with Eric Fromm life affirming in my behavior, there is no, I don't have to love Ted Bundy, or, politicians. I can go back to the Hippocratic Oath and say, I don't want to harm anybody, but I don't feel obliged as much as I used to do to help any lame duck I meet. I still tend to do it, but I don't feel as obliged as I used to.
Well, I don't think it is for everybody to have the resilience to come to new points of view during a cold turkey episode.
No.
It might happen, but that's really not
it was
to be inspired by. That's
we're not recommending that, children.
It happens to those who are constructed in a certain way. I think it's a bit of a biological fact, probably has a lot to do with temperament and whatnot. But the cold turkey aspect, that sounds very familiar. I cannot describe it in any other way. And so somehow, because this is a difficulty in my profession, I think we often aim for people to have fewer emotions so that they then can become more rational. To a certain extent, that is true. But I think when it comes to paranoid stuff, it is also very much the other way around. We just need to get rational, even if you need to get that open mind and to just face the facts and just be rational and to dare to think about why do I not agree with my worldview? What is going on? That's the basic question that everybody should have, basically, when we have two different worldviews. It's like, how come we have two different worldviews while living in one world? So, and for paranoia, it's a crucial question. If we do not learn to ask a question, we will always be stuck in some paranoia, because we will never be able to make even a little bit of a shift, even if it's just enough of a shift to have some sort of explanation for why people think different things, and to at least bridge the gap over one tiny little path, build one little bridge so that you can bridge a gap and inhabit the world together. But that's very much a rational thing. Rational thinking and rational discourse are crucial for paranoid people. They may be very difficult, but they're crucial. And once I had a very special experience with somebody who I had been interacting with for like 4 years or 5 years. And there was suddenly they came up to me and they said, now we have been working together quite a bit, like 4 years or 5 years. But you still, when you say something, you often surprise me. You know what that means, right? And I said, no, I have no idea. I was like, what are they? Well, he said, that means that I've never really understood, I've never really noticed who you are.
No.
What a beautiful, that was such a beautiful way of expressing this mindset, of expressing this moment where you think, hey, I have a worldview and it's hitting a wall all the time. This worldview of mine doesn't open this vista where I can point and say, look, now this is going to happen and that's over there. It's each and every time it's like, where are things? A beautiful way of expressing this switch to an open mind and an open mindset. Absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, William James, the great William James, I'm going to say that because he said some very clever things and really opened up psychology. He is one of the founders. But one of the things he talked about was what he called noesis. the feelings of knowledge, the feeling of being certain. And there's a neurologist called Robert A. Burton who wrote a wonderful book called On Being Certain.
Fabulous book.
And
everyone should read that.
Everyone should read it. His other book, A Skeptic's Guide to the Mind, is also wonderful. In fact, it's so wonderful that I emailed him and thanked him, and I even got a response. So I'm very happy about that. I may, if I pluck up courage, actually ask to interview him at some time. But this idea that we have these feelings of certainty, I think, coming to the point where we accept that much of what we believe is belief. I had some guy who was trying to convince me that he had no beliefs. You know, he was an atheist and therefore he had no beliefs. And I said, do you believe that? You know,
yeah, that's the obvious first question. It was exactly what I was thinking. When you believe, you have no beliefs.
And as has been pointed out elsewhere, the only thing that perceives the universe directly is a single-celled creature. That everything else has interpretive mechanisms. And the sad thing is that the single-celled creature can't actually think. So there's nothing it can do with perceiving reality directly. We have to interpret reality, and we have to fit it into our own schemes, our own schemas, to understand it. But to always be willing, I think it was Richard Feynman who said he had no opinion that he wouldn't be willing to change within 5 minutes if presented with the evidence. And you know, I hope that that's true for me. But I think if I knew it was true for me, it wouldn't be. And I hear from what I've told about Richard Feynman that it wasn't actually true for him. But you know, that's I met somebody who knew him. But one hopes that one will be able to go away and consider the evidence and think about it.
One should strive for that, to have that attitude,
yeah,
to have that open mind and to be open and think, hey, this is not what I expected. And then to pay attention instead of closing off and sticking with this feeling of knowing. The feeling of knowing is a problem.
Yeah. And of course, as the great Leon Festinger pointed out, with the theory of cognitive dissonance, the tendency is that the more evidence you're presented, the more firm your belief will be. That the ability to disregard evidence and strengthen one's existing opinion, one's prejudice, is natural. And overcoming that is maturity, is adulthood, is growing up.
It is. Now, I have one little detail that I am also trying to fit into this puzzle, but I should actually be looking these things up. I remember quite some time ago reading an article about the, in my language, we call it the electropotential, the electrical activity in the brain going up in certain areas for certain reasons. So they had been doing this research, and I cannot find the article. I must have it somewhere. I'll go after the information. Basically, what this research said was that there are people whose let's say attention systems will be more activated when they are confronted with something surprising or something alarming or something that requires more attention, something that's suddenly moving or happening, you know, where our survival system would pay attention because, you know, that's evolutionarily speaking. If something new happens, you have to figure out whether it's a danger or not. So we should have these neurons that will fire and that will say, hey, there's something going on over there, or there's something at the corner of your, you know. And there seem to be people whose neurons actually go through a dip. They lower their activity when attention is required. And it may go up after a while, but the first thing they do is the attention goes down, not up. So there is some variation in nervous systems, apparently, when something surprising is incoming. When something, you know, when you hit the wall, or somebody throws a fact at you, or things don't turn out the right way, when you hit some wall. So some people will be able to focus on it immediately. They will take it in because their brain just says, hey, what's that? And it sort of grabs the info and what's going on and how can this be? It might well be, if there should be more research by now, because it was years ago that I read this, but it might well be that we have a little bit of a biological tendency to these foreclosures or not. If you have the type of head that will just, you know, just, even if you don't like the facts, but your brain cells just latch onto them, like, what is that? You know, that may well be a sort of an inborn characteristic, a genetic predisposition to keeping an open mind, because your mind is just doing it. It's just not going away from the new facts. It's just saying, what is that, all the time. Whereas the people who have this lowering of this electro potential, as we call it, I have no idea what it's called in English, but people who have this diminished brain activity at first, they may struggle a lot if they have to sort of switch it on again, or to wait for it to come into action and to finally notice that something is off, you know. They may need their feeling of certainty because they have very little to hang on to if their brain is not taking it in, if their brain is not actually reacting to the new stuff. And so if that's the case, then we are even more victims of our genetic predispositions than we were thinking. And it's a tendency that we have.
There's also a nurture potential there, which, if you look at our archaic educational systems, which are Victorian at best, although there's a lot less hitting than there used to be, that by fact saturation as the essence of education, by the idea of you have to remember all of these facts, you know, and we know that Einstein didn't remember what the speed of light was because he knew he could look it up, as he said.
Yeah.
We've got Wikipedia now, and that could actually close down that electro potential. It could make somebody less likely to, you know, because school's boring, hey? And people are trying to drench you with facts. And having a fact-based education rather than a thought-based education, rather than you having to work things out, might actually be doing something as well. And I think, again, with the understanding of symbolic evolution, that the way that we change, even our DNA is written on by the symbolic interactions that we're involved in, you know, which is the new thought in the last 20 years in evolutionary development. That if we taught people to communicate differently, we taught them to relate differently, and we taught, in fact, if we just taught some communication skills about listening to people actively and making sure you hear, that's a great one that comes up from, you know, the humanistic psychotherapies, this idea of, and it's still not taught. You're kind of going, you know, I mean, I think it was Carl Rogers where I first read about this in the 80s. I sort of went, why wasn't I told this when I was a kid? You know, that I sit back, I listen to what people say, I reflect it back to them to show that I've understood. You know, that would probably make life a bit easier, wouldn't it? If we all, you know, had something of that.
But yeah. No, but if that, I agree, I very much agree. And to learn to think, to learn to process information and to put it together until it works, until it is correct, you know, that's essential, of course. Well, the education system is very slowly changing. I see a lot of it happening right now. It's beginning to take hold.
Oh, definitely.
Even then, if you have the type of brain that with every new information will slow down, if you have the type of brain that says, oh, that's new, and then looks the other way, and you have to sort of make it look, you have to sort of really work hard to take something in, that must have a profound effect on how you deal with new things, how you deal with learning. And it might be that we will discover that people who struggle to learn, children who struggle to learn, actually have such a brain. They have a brain that has a very specific way of dealing with incoming stuff. And we may figure out a way of helping them with it. But it may very well, with people who don't get any support with this, or no guidance, or they just have to do as you just said, you know, they just have to repeat stuff because they're supposed to know it. it may actually just get them to get very much set in their ways. Now, they know some stuff and they're certain and they're done with it because their brain is not going to take in anything new. If that's actually there, then we're in trouble until we figure this out, until we understand that this is the case with some people and that they're just biologically set in their ways.
Well, I have long believed that my understanding of the world derives from me having learning disabilities, that as a child, I did not understand what was going on around me. And it took me a long time to understand that other people were better at pretending they understood. And that I didn't find school useful as a place of education, that because I discovered quite early on that I could only learn things that I was interested in. And the way that something is presented, so for example, after I left school, I read Asimov's book on chemistry. And because chemistry was presented as history, it made sense to me. I suddenly understood what a free radical was. It wasn't necessarily just a political thing. What Lavoisier and Pasteur and Dalton, by having names and personalities and stories, rather than, we're going to do this in a test tube, it made sense to me and it fitted together for me. And I think everybody has their own learning style. There are some people are more visual. I'm a painter, but I'm not especially visual. I don't think in images. I think more in words. And that can become quite ridiculous because I have a system of puns that goes on in my mind. I see the various different meanings, and somehow that creates memory hooks and helps me to remember things. So I have a better than average memory as a consequence. But I think that is the fundamental. I'm a big fan of Sir Ken Robinson and his ideas about education. And while I agree with you that education is changing, I have two boys who've just finished school in the last year, and the schooling they got was reprehensible at best. It was very poor. So while they weren't hit as I was as a child, they weren't shouted at, which is still a commonplace in some schools. They weren't engaged, and the information they were given, and I did get into a bit of a fight with the psychology teacher about this, because my son Sam, who he did an advanced level, a senior high school course in psychology, and I pointed out to this woman that the textbooks were at least 25 years out of date, and she argued with me that was not true and that she taught it. It was sort of like, can we sit down and I'll go through the textbook with you and point out to you? And she was, oh, no, I'm not doing that. It's like, oh, there's the end of education, where people become fixed in a curriculum and they say, this is what we teach you. And your interest in the subject is of no concern. I was told again and again, and I've said this elsewhere, but I heard it so often from teachers in 3 different schools, you have to jump through hoops. And then you'll get an education. You have to pass these tests so that will let you learn something. Whereas the new model, which is coming along, is the online model, where pioneers like Khan at Khan Academy, when Sam did his biology, in fact, for his GCSEs, which are taken at 16 here, he was utterly confused by what he'd been taught. And he sat with Khan Academy, and at every point where he'd been told, memorize this and we'll explain it later, Khan explained it. And so he had a coherent, consistent body of information, which gave him a very good pass at the exam. And there are so many simple ideas that might change there. But as often happens, I've meandered off away from the subject because I am interested. And that is the difference between me and so many people who have an education. that I'm fascinated by the world and what happens in
But
it.
what goes around comes around, but that goes for the topics as well, because there was one last thing and you're actually touching on it. And it was something that I wanted to connect with the topic of paranoid thinking. And we already touched on it when we talked about keeping an open mind. But I think that curiosity is you cannot be curious and paranoid at the same time. That's just not possible.
What an interesting point.
Because if you, that's just, curiosity cures a lot of things. Just wanting to know, wanting to figure things out. Your son wanting to understand what on earth is going on with this biology topic. And just looking into some different stuff, even if nobody told him to read that, just because he wants to figure it out. That's what saves the day, and it saves many more things, obviously. And it's the essence of science, by the way.
Of course.
The wish to know what we don't know yet. So, and I think it is also what saves former cult members and people who leave pressure groups and people who leave belief systems behind because they're not convinced anymore by the belief that they were taught. Curiosity is what gets us out of so many dire straits. Curiosity is fantastic. So I wanted to, this was the last thing I wanted to say, that if anybody ever fears that they are being paranoid or overly aggressive or misinterpreting everything, just be curious. Just wonder as much as you can. Look into things, look them up, go after them. Chase facts. Be curious.
Find people to talk with, and don't believe everything you read on Google or in Wikipedia. Keep searching, and perhaps it's worth saying that possibly curiosity is what differentiates our species from the others. Ladybirds probably aren't very curious. They probably go, oh, I wonder what that's what's allowed us to create technology and science. It's also worth yet again underlying that science is not a belief system. It's an approach. It's a method. And it's a method that demands challenge, that says, is that true? Is what Raymond Dart and Konrad Lorenz said true? And for that matter, is what Bob Brain said true? Let's keep on asking. And that keeps life interesting and has that other thing, which is the human demand for novelty, for newness. I think there was an attempt in the countercult world in Germany to introduce the word Neugier, the idea of being driven by having something new, and the new age being very much an aspect of that you bounce from one cult to another, trying to find something new. But that sense of novelty is also an aspect of curiosity that people who are just wanting to understand, wanting to know more, wanting to enjoy more in life.
Yes.
That curiosity is a fundamental aspect of that.
Yes. And it is therefore also a little bit of a diagnostic element. If and when you find that you're not curious, keep in mind that you may have to worry about something, or you may have to, just take a better look at what's going on, because it's really healthy to be curious. It protects us from many, many very grave mistakes.
It does indeed. Well, this has been wonderful as ever. And so thank you, Jessica. And I'm John Atack.
I'm Jessica Terwiel. I had a great time.
Yep, me too. Thanks a lot.
Talk to you soon.
Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.